1:01 a.m. Moscow, December 27th. The largest New Year's festival on the planet just hit a brick wall of absolute freezing darkness. 1 second, the VDNKh festival was a $100 million neon flex glowing like a Russian Disneyland. The next, the once glowing landmark became a dark silhouette against the freezing night sky. This isn't a power failure. Kiev just proved that if you play with Ukraine's light switches, they won't just flip yours back, they'll disrupt the strategic power supply. To understand how this $100 million propaganda project went dark in a heartbeat, we have to look at the setting. Moscow, late December. To the Kremlin, VDNKh is the ultimate symbol of everything is fine. It has a skating rink twice the size of an NFL field and a New Year's tree so tall it practically doubles as a signal fire for the Kremlin's ego. It's the perfect backdrop designed to tell the Russian public that life is a festive fairy tale, while their army is burning through men and machinery 500 miles away. However, the real holiday special was about to begin 20 miles to the northeast. Deep inside the snow-heavy brush of Losiny Ostrov National Park, Moscow's Green Lung, a six-man team from Ukraine's GUR Special Intelligence was operating in absolute silence. These guys weren't looking for a holiday miracle. They were prepping a surgical strike. And they weren't using multi-million-dollar Western stealth jets. They brought two Dovbush T-10s. Think of the Dovbush T-10 as an aerial aircraft carrier built by guys who grew up modding old cars into high-performance racers. It's a 150-pound composite beast with a 12-foot wingspan. Its body is made of advanced carbon fiber not just for weight, but because it gives the drone the radar signature of a large bird. It's essentially invisible to Russian sensors designed to hunt heavy metal aircraft. Tucked under its wings, each aircraft carries 6 Wasp FPV drones, the lethal cargo destined for Moscow's power heart. It sounds crazy. I understand your doubts. Moscow is ringed by Pantsir-S1 systems' billion-dollar boss fights of the air defense world that can track 300 targets and fire Mach 4 missiles at anything that blinks. To any conventional military, flying a slow-moving drone into this net is a high-risk mission. But remember, Moscow has not been immune to attacks. To the GUR, it was a math problem with a very satisfying solution. By 10 p.m., the catapult was armed. No radio chatter, no lights, just the soft click of the launch rail being locked into place. The mission was a gamble hug. The Yaouza River at 200 feet exploit the ground clutter where radar signals get lost among skyscrapers and power lines, and hope the Pantsir operators were too busy celebrating to notice a large bird flying on 170 miles per hour toward their transformers. The New Year's nightmare had officially launched. As the first Dovbush T-10 crossed the 20-mile mark from the city center, the electronic landscape of Moscow exploded into a frenzy. Russian Pantsir-S1 crews, already on high alert after the Christmas strikes, finally saw something on their screens. But it wasn't the mothership. It was a cloud of chaos. Ukrainian operators had released dozens of decoy drones, literal cardboard gliders with tiny reflectors that mimicked the radar signature of a cruise missile. To the Pantsir's 1RS-2E radar, the skies suddenly looked like a massive incoming swarm. This is where the billion-dollar math starts to fail. The Pantsir is a formidable beast, but it only carries 12 missiles. The Russian operators, panicked and blinded by the scale of the attack, began ripple-firing their 57 E-6 missiles. At $1 million per shot, the Russians were effectively vaporizing cardboard and paper. It's like using a Ferrari to run over a plastic bag. It works, but you're the one losing the investment. While the Pantsir batteries were busy killing $50 decoys, the first Dovbush T-10 was executing a masterclass in terrain masking. It dropped to just 150 feet, literally following the curves of the Yaouza River. By staying below the radar horizon and blending into the ground clutter of the Moscow suburbs, the mothership became a ghost in the machine. As the first Dovbush T-10 reached the 10-mile release line, the air over Moscow turned into an intense engagement zone. The Russian defenders weren't just sitting there, they woke up like a kicked anthill. Mothership 1 released its 6 Wasps, but the sky immediately lit up with streaks of white-hot tracers. A Pantsir-S1 unit stationed on a nearby rooftop finally bypassed the decoys and engaged its twin 2A38M 30mm autocannons. We're talking about Tau 500 rounds per minute of high-explosive incendiary shells tearing through the night. The first Wasp didn't even stand a chance. It was caught in a concentrated burst and destroyed into a cloud of plastic and lithium. 1 down. The remaining 5 drones dove for the deck, weaving between apartment complexes to break the radar lock. But the Russians had a backup plan: flak traps. Security teams on factory roofs began pouring AK-74 fire into the sky, creating a wall of lead. Wasp No. 2 took a 5.45 mm round directly into its rear motor. It began a violent, unrecoverable spin, slamming into a Happy New Year billboard and exploding in a useless ball of fire. 2 down. This is where the video game lag from hell kicked in. Despite the AI Predator mode, the massive Russian jamming was creating ghost images in the drone's thermal sensors. Wasp No. 3 got confused by the heat signature of a nearby industrial chimney, mistaking it for the transformer station. It slammed into the brickwork, achieving nothing but a scorched smudge on a factory wall. 3 down. The mission was teetering on the edge of total failure. Out of the first wave, only 3 drones were left, and they were flying into a storm of lead. But Ukrainian operators are masters of the calculated sacrifice. They used the smoke from the first 3 crashes as a screen. Wasp Numbers 4 and 5 pulled a high-G jink maneuver, dragging the Pantsir's aim away for just 2 seconds. That was the window Wasp No. 6 needed. It screamed over the substation's perimeter fence at 130 miles per hour, locked its AI onto the main 20 kilovolt bus bar, and impacted with surgical precision. The shaped charge fired. A jet of molten copper punched through the transformer's heart. A brilliant sapphire blue electrical arc lit up the Moscow sky for 3 miles, a power flash that signaled the beginning of the end. But the substation was massive. 1 hit wouldn't kill the festival. The Russian operators on the ground were practically high-fiving. On their screens, the threat looked neutralized. They'd swatted down 4 out of 6 drones, and the brownout at the substation seemed like a minor technical headache their engineers could patch up in an hour. To the Kremlin's propaganda machine, this was a win. They were probably already drafting the press release. "Heroic Pantsir crews save Moscow from Ukrainian provocation." They were dead wrong. Because 10 minutes behind the first chaos, the second Dovbush-T10 arrived. This was the double tap. It was a calculated trap designed to exploit the reload gap. You see, a Pantsir-S1 is a beast, but it's a beast with a very specific weakness. Once it fires its 12 missiles, it's out of the fight for at least 5 minutes while a specialized loader vehicle manually cranes new tubes onto the rails. Even worse, those twin 30mm autocannons have a duty cycle. After dumping thousands of rounds into the first wave and the decoys, the barrels were literally glowing cherry red. If they kept firing, the heat would warp the rifling, turning a billion-dollar precision weapon into a very expensive garden hose. Just as the Russian crews were climbing out of their cabins to vent the heat, the second Dovbush-T10 crested the horizon from a completely different vector, the northwest. Mothership 2 released its 6 Wasps at a distance of 8 miles, and the Russian defense went from victory party to total panic in 15 seconds. But this time, Moscow had a surprise of its own. An elite Gvardia unit, tipped off by the first strike, had scrambled a mobile Krasuka 4 electronic warfare truck to a bridge overlooking the Yauza River. They didn't just jam the signals, they flooded the 2.4 and 5.8 GHz bands with a white noise wall of 500 watts. Wasp No. 7, the first of Wave 2, hit that wall and went blind instantly. Its video feed turned into static, and without a pilot's hand, it drifted lazily into a residential high-rise, exploding harmlessly against a concrete balcony. At the same time, Wasp No. 8 was targeted by a Russian soldier on a factory roof with an EDM-4S Skywiper jamming gun. It was a classic duel, $15,000 of handheld tech versus an $8,000 drone. The jammer won. The drone's flight controller glitched out and it nosedived into the frozen river. The Russian commanders thought they had regained control, but they forgot one thing: Ukrainian engineers are the kings of the firmware update. The remaining 4 Wasps triggered their Dead Man's AI. This is a specialized Brave 1 algorithm that kicks in when all external signals, GPS, Starlink, and radio are flatlined. The drones stopped trying to talk to the operators. Instead, their onboard Skynote-S processors began running a visual odometry loop. By comparing the high-contrast lights of the Moscow streets against a preloaded 3D digital twin of the city, the drones were essentially reading the map of Moscow like a human would. You can jam the airwaves, but you can't jam the fundamental geometry of a city. The Russians realized the drones weren't stopping. In a desperate move, they activated a hidden Tor M2 system that had been held in reserve near the Kremlin. The Tor is the final boss. It's faster and more accurate than the Pantsir. It launched two 9M331 missiles. Wasp number 9 executed a desperate 9G evasive maneuver, but the Tor's proximity fuse was too smart. It detonated 20 feet away, shredding the drone with tungsten fragments. The odds were now 50-50. 3 drones left, 1 substation. Wasp number 10 acted as the sacrificial lamb. It intentionally climbed to 500 feet, making itself a massive glowing target on the Tor's radar. The Russian operator took the bait and fired his last ready missile. Wasp 10 was vaporized, but it bought the final 2 drones exactly 11 seconds of silent flight time. Wasp numbers 11 and 12 were now less than 500 yards from the target. They weren't just flying, they were screaming. They locked their thermal sensors onto the primary transformer's cooling manifold, a target no larger than a pizza box. The Russian security teams on the ground opened up with everything they had: AK-74s, PKM machine guns, even a stray flare gun. It was a wall of lead. Wasp number 11 took a bullet through its battery pack, burst into flames, but its momentum carried it forward. It didn't hit the bus bars, but it slammed into the backup generator's fuel tank. A massive orange fireball erupted, masking the approach of the final drone. Wasp number 12 emerged from the smoke of its fallen brother like a ghost. It had 4% battery left. Its front left motor was vibrating from a near miss. But the AI didn't care about the damage. It saw the 20 kilovolt main transformer, identified the sweet spot where the oil lines entered the pressurized casing, and initiated a terminal dive at 140 miles per hour. Impact. The 2-pound-shaped charge detonated. At -4 degrees Fahrenheit, the physics were brutal. The jet of molten copper didn't just pierce the transformer, it caused a bolted fault, a catastrophic bridge between the high-voltage internal windings and the grounded steel tank. Inside the substation, the sound was like a thunderclap that wouldn't end. 70 tons of mineral oil superheated to 3,000 degrees in a microsecond expanded with the force of a small bomb. The pressure relief valves vaporized. A massive sapphire blue arc of electricity, a 100-foot-long power flash, shot into the sky, turning the Moscow night into an artificial day for 5 terrifying seconds. Back at the VDNKh festival, the "Everything is Fine" propaganda show finally met its maker. The sapphire light from the substation reflected off the ice rink. These were the sounds of the regional circuit breakers, the last line of defense exploding as the power surge ripped backwards through the grid. The millions of fairy lights didn't just dim, they surged with a blinding final brilliance before their filaments melted. The 100-foot New Year's tree flickered like a dying star, and then absolute soul-crushing darkness. The music died mid-note. The giant LED screens, which had been showing images of Russian military glory, went black. In the -4 degree cold, the silence was heavier than the snow. Ukraine hadn't just hit a transformer. They had systematically dismantled the Kremlin's Fortress Moscow myth with $60,000 worth of garage genius tech and a very long memory. The hunters had become the hunted, and the most expensive party in Russian history was over, while the Russian Ministry of Defense scrambled to call it a minor technical glitch. The satellite images from NASA's fire tracking systems told a different story, a massive thermal spike at the heart of Moscow's power infrastructure. This mission cost Ukraine roughly $60,000, the price of 2 Dovbush Motherships and a dozen FPV drones. In exchange, they neutralized a multi-million-dollar transformer substation that will take months to fully repair due to Western sanctions on specialized high-voltage components. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Russia expended at least 15 Pantsir and Tor missiles during the engagement. At roughly $1 million per interceptor, Moscow spent $15 million to shoot at cardboard decoys and garage tech, and they still lost the target. In Russia, the New Year isn't just a holiday. It's the most important cultural event of the year, a time of state-mandated optimism. By casting VDNKh into total darkness, Ukraine didn't just hit a transformer, they hit the reset button on the Russian public's sense of security. The myth of Fortress Moscow is dead. The cold has replaced the "everything is fine" propaganda. It is the ultimate symmetrical receipt, a stark reminder that you cannot weaponize winter against millions of Ukrainian families and expect your own festive lights to stay on. Today, the world witnessed the Dovbush-Wasp doctrine in action. It's the evolution of the David versus Goliath story, where AI-guided garage tech and clever mothership tactics can systematically dismantle a billion-dollar defense grid. It proves that in modern war, it's not about who has the biggest missile. It's about who has the smartest algorithm and the most creative engineers. Ukraine just showed that they aren't just fighting for their territory, they're fighting for the right to return every blow with interest. So, here's a question for all the armchair generals out there. If you were the commander of this drone unit and you knew the Russians were now moving all their remaining defense systems to Moscow, where would you strike next? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Bye for now.